And happy Sunday, February, February 28th, the last day of the month. Happy Black History Month to all my brothers and sisters out there. I'm going to read to you an article, actually, just part of an article I found on in the National Library of Medicine. And this one is going to be Time in Nature, a prescription for preventative or management of hypertension. I'm just going to read you guys the abstract, uh, and then we're going to go over a little bit of the introduction, and then we're going to do a little bit of the mechanisms of action, and then skip down to the conclusion, and then you guys can read it for yourself. And I'll leave the link to this article in the description. I hope that everyone is having a good Sunday, spending time with friends and family. Remember, as we live in this new digital world, robots, algorithms, drones, and with everything changing in the economy, make sure that we take care of ourselves and make sure we take care of our loved ones and family and friends. All right, so let's start off with the abstract. It says, growing evidence suggests that time in nature may positively influence a broad range of health outcomes, including blood pressure. The mechanisms by which nature exerts this influence is not fully understood, but it has been proposed that nature or natural environments promote health due to opportunities for physical activity and stress reduction. Experimental and observational studies suggest that time in forests or other green spaces is associated with reduced blood pressure, lower prevalence of hypertension, and reduced odds of using antihypertensive medications. Therefore, prescribing time in nature for patients at risk or diagnosed with hypertension may have substantial benefits. And the keywords in this, nature therapy, nature green space, blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. And there's a quote here. The analysis found a significant lower systolic and diastolic blood pressure in the forest environment compared to non-forest environments. And once again, I'm just going to say this. I am not a doctor. I cannot prescribe anything. I just like to do research. I am a forest therapy and therapy and nature mindfulness guide. So I do research on forest therapy, nature mindfulness. I study how nature, the benefits that humans receive from being out in nature, and I like to relay that information onto you because I want us to be happy, healthy, whole, happy. And I found that we can do that if we spend more time out in nature. I don't think that, I think the world that we live in now, as good as it is, as technologically advanced as it is, our bodies has not evolved like technology. You know what I mean? So I don't think our bodies are going to catch up to that type of technology. So instead of us living in semi natural places, we could always move back to more natural places or figure it out. You know what I mean? We live in a new age. We could figure out how to make more natural environments for the human being to live in and to thrive in. So let's get to this introduction really quickly. And if you guys like this type of content, you can subscribe. If you guys have any readings or journals or articles you'd like me to go over, I would be happy to do that. Let's hit up the introduction really quick. Hypertension is the leading cause of cardiovascular death and premature death worldwide. Modifiable risk factors for hypertension include both lifestyle, stress, nutrition, smoking, alcohol, sleep, physical activity, and environmental factors, air pollution, urban heat, noise. A growing body of evidence suggests that nature therapy may exert influence on a broad range of health outcomes, including cardiovascular disease. Let's talk about this first part for just a second. Modifiable risk factors for hypertension, including both lifestyle, stress, nutrition, smoking, alcohol, sleep, physical activity. I know for a fact, especially for me, what got me the most, I was super stressed before I got really sick, and for those of you who are in my Patreon, we talk more about that. I suffered a lot. My nutrition wasn't where it should have been, I think. But I was physically active, which was interesting. My sleep was off. I remember I was working overnight for many, many, many years, and so a lot of these things we have power over. We have power over lifestyle choices. And I think one cool thing about spending time in nature is that that is a lifestyle change in and of itself. You know what I mean? When you go and you spend time out, you go for a hike. I don't like to hike. I love forest bathing. I like going out in nature and just sitting there and looking at the flowers and the rivers and looking at the trees and smelling them and like touching grass, as the kids say. I like doing that, taking those nice slow walks to the forest preserves for hours and hours and hours. I enjoy doing that. But there are a lot of different ways you can get out into nature. You could start a garden. You know what I mean? There are so many different ways you could do positive lifestyle changes and totally drastically change your health, which I think is really cool. So, a growing body of evidence suggests that nature therapy may exert influence on a broad range of health outcomes, including cardiovascular disease. A systematic review and meta analysis published in 2020 found that individuals residing in areas with more green spaces have a reduced incidence prevalence of stroke and are less likely to die of cardiovascular disease. Reductions in, we got to look up this word, I don't know what it means, ischemic heart disease, mortality, and cardiovascular disease mortalities were also found. 2/3 of studies included in the meta-analysis were published in or after 2019, indicating a growing interest in the field. The purpose of the article is to explore the underlying mechanisms through which nature positively influences blood pressure and describe findings from studies that evaluate the impact of time in nature on systolic and diastolic blood pressure specifically. So I think that's really, really cool when you think about it. It's also interesting that they have these studies. So they notice that people who are around these green spaces, right, have less instances, where they it says reduced instances or prevalence of stroke, which is very interesting. Take a look around your area. I would say, how much green space is in your area? That's one of the things that I had to really that I came to notice. I was lucky in that the part of the city Chicago that I lived in had a lot of green spaces, but I lived close, I should say, to a green space. There were times where I didn't, and there are areas around the city that don't have green spaces, and we see very clearly from this article, right, the risks of not being around those green spaces. So I'm going to skip down. I'm going to let you guys read the mechanisms of action for yourself, and I'm going to and also don't forget the clinical trial data. And I'm going to skip down over to the conclusion really quick because I know you guys have things to do, but I know you guys want to hear some good news about what we can do to make our lives better in this new digital age. So time in nature, in this conclusion, time in nature may be helpful in the prevention and treatment of hypertension, or understanding our relationship between nature and blood pressure is our understanding of the relationship between nature and blood pressure is limited by the methods employed in the studies published to date. More prospective analysis. Oh man, this would be great probably to study to do. This is amazing. More prospective analysis with individual level information on exposure and outcomes, with individual level information on exposure and outcomes are needed to establish a causal relationship between nature therapy and blood pressure. Despite these limitations, literature suggests that visiting or exercising in green spaces at least once a week for 30 minutes is associated with lower rates of hypertension, and at least 3 visits to green space per week is associated with reduced rates of antihypertensive use. It appears these benefits may be mediated in part through increased physical activity and stress reduction. However, the mechanism is not fully understood. Prescribing time in nature for patients at risk or diagnosed with hypertension may have substantial benefits. Therefore, providers are encouraged to add this approach to their treatment regime. So, very clearly from this, we learn that just being out in green spaces is going to be helpful to our bodies. And I'm reading a lot about that. I think one book, if you are interested, is Last Child in the Woods. And you can check that out on my Instagram page. I think that that is a really good book. And, also, Forest Bathing by Dr. Lee. I know I'm butchering his first name. I'm going to learn how to pronounce it. Quing Lee. It's with a Q, Quing, Li. And that's on forest bathing. Very good book that covers nature therapy, forest bathing, nature therapy, and what it is, those benefits that humans get by spending time in nature. So you really learn about our relationship, about what nature does for us, not only what nature does for us, but what we can do for nature, in preserving it, because we are from nature. We are a part of nature. And so preserving it is in our best interest as human beings. And so I'm going to leave you guys now. You can go over the articles if you like. I'm going to scroll up so you guys can see some of those references. If you like this type of content, I can do more with different articles. This is my first time doing this one, but it was exciting to do. And we can do shorter ones where we could go over the entire article, read a couple articles, check out a couple of different headlines. Let me know if you guys like this. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And you guys have a beautiful day.